my fan memorabilia collection. Magazines. Hello and welcome to the second part of this series, just taking a look at some of the memorabilia that I've got for various fandoms. Now, the first magazine that I ever bought that I still have was obviously Doctor Who magazine. Wasn't the first magazine that I bought. I seem to remember that I used to buy in the early 80s when I was very little. I used to buy like the Return of the Jedi weekly comic, I think. I don't have any of those now. I mean, I lost interest in Star Wars even while I was still in my pre-teens, and I never regained it back again. So, but I still have a lot of Doctor Who magazines. First Doctor Who magazine I ever bought was like the September-October 1987 issue, along with that year's autumn special. I found them in a newsagent while on holiday on the Isle of Man. It was a very boring holiday because even though it was like school holidays, they basically said that it was their off season and everything was shut, and it was drizzling and miserable and there was bugger all to do. It was a very thrilling and exciting holiday. And I just remember, because I'd just become a fan like the Christmas before. It was while Paradise Towers was on. We were away the week of the last episode of Paradise Towers. I think I'd set the timer to catch the last episode on video. So it was that month, and we went in this newsagents, and they had two Doctor Who magazines. They had that issue. It was the one with the painting of Sylvester and Mel and the Rani on the front cover, and they had the autumn special issue as well. And I bought them both. I had no idea there was a Doctor Who magazine. Honestly, I'd never heard of it. I had no idea. So it really kind of, it was like, oh wow, there's a Doctor Who magazine. And I thoroughly enjoyed them, thoroughly devoured them. And when we got home, I basically, I got my mother to set like a permanent order with our newsagents for every month to buy Doctor Who magazine. And that carried on until like mid-91 when we emigrated to Australia, at which point I became a subscriber. And I subscribed basically through to 1998. I kind of gave it up in 1998. I mean, I've talked about this before in like the Mind of Evil review. Late 90s, I kind of got a bit burnt out on Doctor Who. I think it was because of how long they dragged on the idea that it wasn't cancelled, it was coming back, and they dragged this on, and we dragged that whole thing with Steven Spielberg and Amblin and all of that crap on, and all of that culminated in the TV movie, which I didn't particularly like, and then went nowhere, and it was like, that's all you're getting, After that, it was like, all the stories and all the rumours were pretty much over, and it was like, no, the show's fucked, it's done. And at that point, I'd kind of stopped going to the local fan club. I'd stopped buying the books for the most part. I'd really just kind of burnt out. And Doctor Who magazine just seemed to me to be getting really thin. Every month it just seemed like I've heard all this stuff before, because there was nothing new to say. And so I basically stopped subscribing. The next time I bought an issue, I think it was about 2001. It was it would have been, yeah, because it was after I saw Mind of Evil and started getting back into it again. It was the Tom Baker special. It wasn't a special, but it was just it was an ordinary issue of the magazine, but it was like a Tom special celebrating his era, with each season getting its own kind of feature. And I seem to remember looking at it in the shops, and I picked it up because I saw that they were actually saying nice things about season 17, because it was like, that, I think the last time I checked, everybody hated season 17, even though, you know, that was already one of my favourites back then. And I kind of picked it up in the shops and I flicked through it and it looked kind of good. And I looked at the season 17 one and it's like, oh my God, they've actually started to open their minds, you know. So I bought that, and I bought a few. You know, I kept buying them, so not necessarily every month, but irregularly from that point on again. I bought all the special kind of issues. You know, they did a special for each Doctor, from 1 through 8, and I bought all of those. And then, of course, you know, late 2004, was it late 2004? Late 2003, we got the announcement that they were doing a new series, and I think it was sometime in 2004 I actually started subscribing again, which I kept doing up to about 2008, when I was starting to get less enamored of New Who by that point, and I'm like, no, not doing it anymore. I bought a few more. I bought some like to 2010, early 2011, like with Matt Smith. Then I kind of stopped again. I think the penultimate issue that I bought, I don't know whether it was 2012 or 2013, it was the Sophie Aldred interview. And I picked it up because obviously I like Sophie. The very last, I've not bought one since, the very last issue of DWM that I bought was in 2014, and it was the 50th anniversary poll results, and I picked that up. And honestly, I've not actually bought a Doctor Who magazine since. I mean, now it's, you know, to be honest, since 2017, I don't even look at it in the shops anymore. So, yeah, it's kind of done. Back in the day, like early 90s, I subscribed to DWB, which then turned into Dreamwatch. I subscribed to that for a few years. DWB was okay. I think I kind of missed most of the late 80s really vociferous anti-JNT stuff. And there was some good stuff in it. I remember an article that later got reprinted in a book by Gareth Roberts, kind of praising the Williams era. Really liked that article. I subscribed to a lot of magazines. Well, yeah, you know, I subscribed to a lot of magazines, and I bought a lot of magazines in the 90s, mid-90s through to the early 2000s, like TV Zone and SFX. Cult Times, I think I didn't subscribe to, but I pretty much bought it most months in the shops. It was a really huge time. I mean, it was a huge time for like sci-fi and fantasy and that, with like X-Files and all the Star Treks and Buffy and all of that. And of course at that time I wasn't on the internet or anything like that either, so I don't have most of those now. I still have the DWBs, and I still have some of the TV Zones. I pretty much got rid of the rest when I moved to Queensland in 2012, because there were so many of them. I just didn't have the room, and most of them I never looked at, and they didn't really have. I mean, I'd never get rid of Doctor Who magazine simply because the nostalgia factor, but I just didn't have the room to carry on with all of them. That's about it for like that sort of thing. I did buy. This is in relation to Neighbours. I do have a TV soap from like July 1991. I bought that in July 1991. It was like the first week in Australia. I have a TV soap from sometime in 1990, mid-ish 1990, that I actually found in a second-hand bookshop in like 95. And I have some issues of a British magazine, like a UK teen pop culture kind of magazine from like 1991, 1992. that I bought off eBay in the late 2000s, I guess. That's about it for that. I have just recently ordered some other things. They're so recently that they haven't actually come yet. I've ordered a few TV magazines from the UK. I haven't actually found any from Australia yet, which is very telling, I think. I've got it on good authority that there's some good stuff in it, even though I haven't actually seen them yet. I haven't actually got them yet, but there's supposedly some good stuff in there. A TV Times, a TV Quick, a Star TV, and an Inside Soap. Wow, there's a lot of TV magazines in the UK, way more than in Australia. All from late 2004. Anyone who can guess why I bought them gets a cookie. Well, not really. But that's pretty much all I have. That's pretty much what I have in terms of magazines for that. I have an Empire magazine. My brother subscribed to like Film Review and Empire in the 90s. And when he kind of moved out in like 2000, I started buying Empire myself because I wanted to read it. I don't know how long that lasted. It lasted a few years, maybe 4 years. But I mean, it was around that time that I was kind of starting to lose interest in a lot of modern cinema, as I've noted before. And I think by 2004, I just kind of went, yeah, I'm not really that bothered. It's a lot of money every month when there's not really that much I'm actually interested in anymore. So I kind of gave that up. And I gave most of them away. The only one I have is actually one I bought kind of randomly from 2011, which is also the only magazine that I have that has anything Emma Watson related, which is, I think it's like the July-August issue from 2011, because it's the Harry Potter commemorative issue, you know, because obviously it was the last Potter released at the cinema then. And so I bought that. And that's like the only thing I actually have. I don't know why. I've never been remotely interested in like buying magazines for Emma. I don't know why. It just seems kind of perfunctory and pointless. I think it's because it's like she's too famous, you know? It's one thing to kind of seek out stuff for certain other actresses because they're famous, but they're not that famous, you know, and their kind of moment in the sun kind of lasted a relatively short period, like maybe 18 months to 3 years. And it's like it's a challenge to actually find anything kind of memorabilia related to them. And it's like, you know, it's like a quest. You know, the quest is the quest, as Bob Baker and Dave Martin would say. And you know, you almost feel like you've achieved something when you do actually find something for them. Whereas, I mean, there's not much achievement or challenge in looking for anything with Emma Watson in. Like I said, it's like she's too famous, and you'd have to be either rich or completely insane to try and get every piece of memorabilia with her in it, and I'm neither, despite evidence to the contrary of the latter. So that's basically the only magazine I have for that. Now, another magazine I have is a Fangoria issue. I'm not sure what the issue is. I'm not even sure what the year is. I bought it around about 1995, and I found it in the same second-hand book and magazine store that I found that 1990 TV soap. And the reason I bought it was because it actually had a big feature on Black Christmas, the 1974 film Black Christmas. Now, you have to kind of get into the mindset of what it was like in the 90s, because nowadays, I mean, Black Christmas is widely available. It's been released numerous times on DVD, numerous times on Blu-ray. It's got tons of extra features and documentaries and commentaries and all of that sort of thing. and it's generally, it's generally widely acknowledged as a classic film. It's, it's kind of revered in the same breath as the original Halloween now. But that wasn't always the case. Back in the 90s, it was like it was obscure. It was like it was forgotten because it was really not very, very available. The only reason I'd seen it was because I'd managed to kind of rent it from my local video shop. I'd never found it on VHS to buy. And I mean, there was like an SA video warehouse in Adelaide that stocked like tons and tons and tons of second-hand videos that people brought in for trade and stuff like that. And I always looked for it, but I never found it. And I mean, the only reason I'd even heard of it was because I had a vague memory of listening to it on TV as a kid while pretending to be asleep and thinking it was creepy. And for some reason, the name of it stuck in my head. So when I kind of became old enough to rent, R-rated horror movies, that name stuck in my head. And when I saw it on the video shop, I was like, oh, that's that. And of course, I rented it and I absolutely loved it. But it was like nobody else even knew about it. I mean, like I said, my brother subscribed to like several film magazines, and even when they did like a horror special or like a 70s special or something like that, it was like nobody ever mentioned Black Christmas, and it used to drive me up the bloody wall. It's like, am I the only person that knows this movie? Am I the only person that recognizes that this movie is awesome? So finding that issue of Fangoria and like a multi-page feature, with interviews with some of the actors and with Bob Clark, the director, and just, the general tone of it, that this is a classic film. It was like, oh my God, I am not alone, I'm not crazy. Really, no, really, I'm not. Again, it might not seem very much now, like I said, because the world is a completely different place now than it was in the mid-90s. But at the time, it was like amazing. And I think that's about it for magazines. Yeah, I mean, there's a Doctor Who magazine. I have a few film magazines. I have a few TV soaps and TV magazines from certain periods for certain reasons. That's pretty much it, I think, in terms of magazines. Like I said, I used to have tons and tons. I got rid of most of them because I just didn't have the room when I moved. I do still have a Radio Times from the 80s, which is in awful condition. I think it's a Christmas double issue. I can't remember what year. And I have a TV Times Christmas double issue from the 80s. It's the one with that Torval and Dean on the cover. I think it's a painting of Torval and Dean. And that's not in bad condition, actually. I still have those just for nostalgia purposes, because, 80s, I was a kid, happy days. But that's about it, I think, in terms of magazines. Okay, I think that's about enough for one day. I'll finish this up next time by talking about posters and a few miscellaneous items of memorabilia that I have. But that's it for now. Bye bye.